Oh my god, why is there someone always there?
Of the genitalia. And up to 10 kids in total, or 0.0001%, might have a side effect, encephalitis. So we vaccinated 10 million kids. In total, around 120 had side effects that were somewhat serious. Thanks to good medical treatment in developed regions, almost all of them will be fine. What about autism? The connection and vaccines stems from one source.
Stop camping in your spawn, you muppet!
Times. We'll link to further reading and videos in the description. But in 2019, it's fair to say that vaccines cause autism. Right, but what about deaths? It's really hard to say if even a single one of our 10 million vaccinated kids will die. We really did look hard and talk to a lot of different experts. If we ignore self-reporting, we could only come up with a tiny handful of documented cases for all the hundreds of millions of children who received the MMR vaccine since 1971. Measles are many, many thousands of times more dangerous for your child than even the absolute worst case of vaccine side effects. You have to search for lethal vaccine side effects with a huge magnifying glass, and even then it's very hard to confirm. While cases of measles are real and easy to find. In 2017 alone, 110,000 people died from measles worldwide. Statistically, today 300 children will die of measles. One since this video started. Compare vaccines to seatbelts. Are there weird freak accidents where someone gets killed by their seatbelt? Well, yes. But do you actually think it's safer to not put a seatbelt on your kid? Wait a second. What if your kid is actually allergic? What if none of the things we've said apply to your specific situation? In this case, you need to become the greatest vaccination promoter of all. Because if your children can't be vaccinated, only the collective can protect them. This is called herd immunity, and it's the only thing that can protect your unvaccinated child. Herd immunity means that enough people are immune to a disease that it can't spread and dies before it reaches its victims. But to accomplish this for measles alone, 95% of the people around you need to be vaccinated. Conclusion. The problem with the debate about vaccines is that it's not fought on a level playing field. While the pro-vaccine side argues with studies and statistics, the arguments against them are usually a wild mixture of gut feeling, anecdotes and misinformation. And feelings are often immune to facts. We'll not convince anybody by screaming at them, but we can't hide from the reality of what anti-vaccine conspiracies do. They kill babies too young to be vaccinated. They kill healthy children that are just unlucky. They bring serious diseases back from the verge of extinction. And the biggest side effect of vaccines is children. Vaccines are one of the most powerful tools we have to eradicate the monsters that most of us have already forgotten. Let's not bring the beasts back. Fight off other living beings that want to feast on them. So as multicellular life, it came up with ways to defend itself. Today, humans have a sophisticated defense network, like physical barriers, defense cells, and weapons factories. But one of the most important defenses of our body is largely unknown: the complement system. It evolved over 700 million years ago and is an army of over 30 different proteins that work together in a complex and elegant network of truths. About 15 quintillion of them are saturating every fluid in your body right now, guided by nothing anything but chemistry, these proteins are one of the most effective weapons we have against invaders. Many other parts of the immune system are just tools to activate the complement system. But it's also dangerous. Imagine having trillions of little bombs inside your blood that could go off at any moment. So our cells use numerous mechanisms to prevent complement from accidentally infecting them. Okay, what exactly does it do, and what makes it so dangerous? In a nutshell, the complement system does three things. It triples enemies, it activates the immune system, and it rips holes in things until they die. But how? After all, these are mindless proteins randomly drifting around without will or direction. Well, this is actually part of the strategy. Proteins
Oh my god,
in a
what
sort of
fucker.
passive mode. They do nothing until they get activated and change their shape. In the world of proteins, your shape determines what you can and cannot do, because shape determines what you can interact with and in what way. For example, in your passive shape, you might do nothing. In your active shape, however, you might, for example, change the shape of other proteins, activating them so they can activate others. Mechanisms like this one can start cascades that spread very quickly. Imagine the complement proteins as being like a mini system to devour them. Without complement, viruses would be a lot more deadly. But wait, if we have such an effective weapon, we get sick. The problem is that in a war, both sides adapt. For example, when the vaccinia virus infects a cell, it forces it to produce a protein that shuts complement activation down. This way, the virus creates safe zones around the cells it infects. When it kills them and tries to infect more, it has a higher chance of being successful. Or some bacteria, for example, can grab certain molecules from the blood through the complement system and make themselves invisible. So the complement system, while being extremely important, is only one player in the complex and beautiful organization that is our immune system. A beautiful example of how many mindless things do smart things together. This video was sponsored by you. Without your direct support, this channel would not exist, and it's hard to overstate how grateful we are. In 2019, an average Kurzgesagt video took at least 1,200 hours to produce. We need months to research and write our scripts, clear them with experts, illustrate and animate every single picture, and compose original music. This is only possible through a combination of sponsorships, your support on Patreon, and selling merch, like this poster and postcards we made about the complement system. If you yourself want to support us, you can do so by becoming a patron, or maybe getting a personal bird, or by getting one of our support products. The purpose of Kurzgesagt is to make the best videos we can, and to make science more approachable. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Fucking hell.
From hostile deserts to lonely mountains, wherever there is space to expand into, humans do so. So it's hard to believe that we're already making preparations to set foot on Mars and to create the first permanent colony outside of Earth, maybe even terraform another planet and turn it into a second blue home. But wait, before we can get to the nice future, we first
Dude, why do you have that on, bro? Tactical mask. Show you a fire.
But doing so will be gruesome. Even for an expansionist species like us, Mars is... At first glance, Mars seems familiar. Polar ice caps, large valleys, water under its surface, and a day barely longer than Earth's.
Dude!
The ideal place for us to go.
That's tactical mask again.
Mars is
Who has
actually
that,
a
bro?
cold, radioactive desert where the ground is poisonous and breathing is impossible. Mars is awful. certainly don't go there. The pioneers doing the hard work on Mars will have an intensely stressful life filled with incredibly challenging problems never encountered before. But there are plenty of people willing to do that work, and we have the technology to enable them to do it. For this video, we will assume there have been prior missions to Mars to scout out a good place for an outpost, store resources and equipment, and that there's plenty of Mars missions. The first major challenge for our outpost is the fact that Mars is very energy poor. Because of its distance from the Sun, solar power is only 40% as effective as on Earth.
Damn!
And this weakened sunlight is often obscured for days by enormous dust storms. Solar power alone will probably not be enough. Alternatives such as wind and geothermal energy are also unfeasible, as there's hardly any atmosphere and Mars's interior is much too cold. Initially, nuclear technology might be the only option. Since Mars doesn't have easily accessible radioactive elements, the nuclear fuel needs to come to Earth along with the reactor. If we do set it up, we could power our small outpost for the first few years. Unfortunately, all that energy won't be very useful if we can't breathe. Mars's atmosphere is only 1% as dense as Earth's and mostly made up of CO2. So our habitats need to be pressurized and filled with an artificial atmosphere made of nitrogen and oxygen, which comes with more problems. Corners and flat walls are weak points, so the habitats will have rounded and smooth shapes to handle the stress of great pressure differences between the interior and exterior. The airlocks need to be very airtight and work perfectly every time. Without an extensive magnetosphere or a dense atmosphere, half of all radiation coming from space reaches the ground. A person on the surface would be subjected to 50 times the radiation that they would be on Earth. 3 years on the surface of Mars exceeds the radiation dose limits imposed on NASA astronauts for their entire career. This increases cancer risks significantly. To prevent that, we could shield our habitats with a thick layer of frozen CO2 that can be blasted directly into the atmosphere. Covering the dry ice with a meter of dirt would further increase the level of protection. Sadly, this means almost no windows. From the inside, most living spaces will be filled with tunnels. From the outside, they'll look like burial mounds. All of this would still not hold back all the radiation, but reduce it just enough to be survivable for long periods of time. It won't, however, protect anyone who ventures outside. So remote-controlled robots will be used for routine work on the surface while our crew stays inside. Staying inside is a good idea for another reason: Mars dust. It's much finer than dust on Earth, so it could find its way into the gears or electronics of our machines. Because it's also very dry, it's electrostatically charged, sticking to everything, like spacesuits. It would be impossible to avoid carrying lots of Mars dust into our habitat and into the lungs of our crew. To make this even worse, Mars's soil is filled with very toxic perchlorate salts. Constant exposure could be deadly. This problem can still be overcome though. Spacesuits, for example, could be made in a way that they never truly enter the base, but stay attached to the outside of the habitats. Okay, great. Now we've safely isolated humans in terms of energy and air, and protected them from cancer, we just need to feed them. Water is easy to come by. The settlement is positioned near the Martian poles with their thick layers of ice. Growing food is a different kind of challenge though. Mars's soils are alkaline and lack the vital nitrogen compounds that plants need to grow. Before we can grow anything, we will have to decontaminate the soil, which is difficult. Then the soil can be fertilized using recycled biological waste. All of this will take a lot of time and is very energy intensive. So we must use aquaponics to raise fish and plants, making the astronauts' diets more varied and tasty at the same time. This will be an important ecological boost for our overworked crew. All of these things don't solve one fundamental problem though. Mars has only 38% of Earth's surface gravity, which could cause muscle wasting, bone loss and cardiovascular problems. While this might be solved in the future without rotating living spaces, for now our crew has to live with low gravity and exercise a lot to slow the degradation down. Crews will probably have to rotate every few years. After being stuck indoors in tight spaces without windows, with the same people performing the same routines day in, day out, with little contact from the outside world and a lot to worry about.
Hey, let's go,
Like
boys!
Arctic scientists or submarine staff, they will undergo intense psychological screening to make sure they're mentally resilient enough to handle this lifestyle for several years. Establishing a firm infrastructure on Mars will be extremely taxing work that only a group of very determined and competent people can do. Luckily, we have enough money on Earth. And there you have it, a small Mars base that will survive for at least a few decades, as long as it's getting a constant supply of resources, parts, nuclear fuel and crews from Earth. Unfortunately, Mars and Earth are separated by millions of kilometers